Welcome to Inclusive Gathering Birmingham. You're really welcome to be here, whether you've been with us on this whole long journey in lockdown of online stuff, or this is your first time. Whoever you are, whether you consider yourself a kind of person of faith or not, this is a great place to meet other people and learn and explore. So whatever your gender identity or your sexual orientation or your race or ethnicity, your neurodiversity, your ability, disability, whatever, you're really welcome here. And for us, I say this a lot now because I think it's important, but we're a learning community, and that means that we're always wanting to be on the lookout for things that we don't know. And we also want this to be a safe space for people to be able to share what they really think and not have to put on some sort of fake church answers to stuff, but to really explore together, because being part of us does not mean that you have to sign up to agreeing with everybody on everything. So that's how we think it should be. Anyway, so today is one of our monthly services where we focus the themes around a book or a podcast. So some of you may have read The Book of Joy, which is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. That's what we're looking at today. If you haven't read it, don't worry, because Julia and Sam are going to be having a conversation about some of those themes around joy and suffering in a little bit. And afterwards, there'll be an opportunity to join us on Zoom for a discussion about it. And again, you're very welcome to join in, whether or not you've had a chance to read the book. So there you go. That's the plan for today. I'm going to hand over to the band.
Hi, I'm Mol, and I'm part of Inclusive Gathering Birmingham. As part of our regular worship gathering when we meet together in person, we always have what we call a question for sharing, to give people a moment to connect with each other. Obviously, we can't do that in the same way today, but we still want to ask you a question and give you a few minutes to share your answers in the comments on Facebook Live. This week's question is there something in your life that gives you joy? It could be a special person, a place, a food, a piece of art, or something else.
Hi, I'm Adam from Inclusive Gathering Birmingham. When I think about the things that bring me joy, it's being outdoors in the fresh air, appreciating God's wonderful creation, taking in all of the scenic views. I'm currently surrounded by plants. I love gardening. I love going on long walks and appreciating everything that God has created for us to take in and see.
Our prayer today is by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, adapted from a prayer by Sir Francis Drake. Disturb us, O Lord, when we're too pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dreamed too little or sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, O Lord, when with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the water of life. When, having fallen in love with time, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of heaven to become dim. Stir us, O Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture into wider seas where storms show thy mastery, where losing sight of land we shall find the stars. In the name of him who pushed back the horizons of our hopes and invited the brave to follow. Amen.
Your love feels like trumpet sound. life is like a mountain. Your life is like a mountain, and your heart is like a church with wide open doors. And to be with you is to find myself in the best of dreams. Oh, your love feels like trumpets. Your love feels like high summer. I says your love feels like high summer. Your life is like an ocean. Your life is like an ocean. I wanna dive in naked, lose myself in your depths, and to be with you is to find myself in the best of dreams. Oh, your love feels like trumpets. Please don't shake me, no, don't wake me. I wanna be with you, 'cause being with you is the same as being you. Being you. Your love feels like trumpets.
Hi there, I'm Martin from Inclusive Gathering, and today's gathering draws on themes from the Book of Joy, which is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu about joy and suffering. For our reading today, I'll be sharing 2 quotations from the book. These words are from Desmond Tutu. The Dead Sea in the Middle East receives fresh water, but it has no outlet, so it doesn't pass the water out. It receives beautiful water from the rivers, and the water goes dank. I mean, it just goes bad. And that's why it is the Dead Sea. It receives and does not give. In the end, generosity is the best way of becoming more and more joyful. If you are setting out to be joyful, you are not going to end up being joyful. You're going to find yourself turned in on yourself. It's like a flower. You open, you blossom, really because of other people. And I think some suffering, maybe even intense suffering, is a necessary ingredient for life, certainly for developing compassion. These words are from the Dalai Lama. Joy is the reward, really, of seeking to give joy to others. When you show compassion, when you show caring, when you show love to others, do things for others, in a wonderful way you have a deep joy that you can get in no other way. You can't buy it with money. You can be the richest person on earth, but if you care only about yourself, I can bet my bottom dollar you will not be happy and joyful. But when you are caring, compassionate, more concerned about the welfare of others than about your own, wonderfully, you suddenly feel a warm glow in your heart because you have, in fact, wiped the tears from the eyes of another.
Hello, my name's Julia, and I, together with David Derbyshire, run the Book and Podcast Club.
Hello, I'm Sam. Good to be with you all.
So, do you know these 3 people on the front of the cover?
Well, I know 2 of them. I know that there's the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, or he was Archbishop, and don't know who's the guy in the middle.
Okay, so the guy in the middle is the publisher, and it was his idea to do this book. And he's worked with Desmond Tutu on previous books, so he was able to get in touch with him, and Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama have quite a close connection, so they decided that they would do it on and around the time of the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday. So what do you know about them? You said you recognise these two.
Yeah, well, I know that the Dalai Lama comes from Tibet and lived there until he was about 15 in quite luxurious circumstances, but then there was disagreements between Tibet and China, and he had to flee for his life, and ended up in India.
Absolutely. And then Desmond Tutu, I think most people will know, used to be the Archbishop of Cape Town, and was very important, together with Nelson Mandela, in setting up the Truth and Reconciliation committees. And I think it was very much his idea, and not only was his idea, but he masterminded how it all worked. So both of those two people have had really challenging lives at different times, and yet are recognised as absolute world spiritual leaders in their own right.
Yeah.
I've put a birthday box there
Yeah.
because not because it was the Dalai Lama's birthday, but because they decided that this book should be written as a gift to the world. And they said that they wanted that regardless of whether you were religious or not religious or what faith you were. They wanted this book to be useful for everybody and to bring more joy into everybody's life.
Okay. What's the secret?
What's the secret? Well, they decided it would be good to think of it as a 3-layer cake. So it includes teachings from both the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop, and the questions that they had for each other, but also questions that Douglas Abrams had for them as well, who led some of the conversations, or at least asked some of the questions, but also put the book together. There were also cameras up filming all the discussions. The discussions went over 5 days, so they were quite in depth. The second part of the cake, the layer, is about including information about brain science and experimental psychology. They were both, and I think particularly the Dalai Lama, keen that everything was backed up by science. Again, they wanted this to be useful for people who wouldn't see themselves as religious people, but equally the Dalai Lama was saying even the science even helps him, because he's read about how beneficial it is to meditate, for instance. It helps him on those days where he doesn't feel like getting up and meditating, which he does do for about 5 hours a day, apparently, getting up at 3 o'clock. The Archbishop said he can't quite cope with that, but then somebody else said, oh well, he does do 3 or 4 hours, so he's not doing badly.
No. So tell me a bit more about the book itself and what's in the book.
Well, as well as those two strands, interweaving them are a whole load of stories about how they interact, but also they tell lots of stories about the people that they've come across over the years, people that have inspired them. So they were saying that, as much as people might say, oh, put them on a pedestal, they will say, actually, part of the reason we can be inspiring is because we've seen so many so-called ordinary people who have lived their lives with great sacrifice and joy at the same time. And then at the end, they do give some joy practices, what they call joy practices. But they said this isn't a workbook. This is something that they've compiled, which you can pick and choose from, things that they might have found useful that you might find useful. So what do you think of this statement? Joy is much bigger than happiness.
So that tends to suggest that happiness and joy are two different things.
It does, doesn't it? I've got that mixed up from time to time. And I think even in the book, there are times where the terms might be used interchangeably, but equally there are other times when they're used quite differently. So they're very clear that what is what they're not looking at is pleasurable activities, shall we say.
All right.
Not to say that there shouldn't be pleasurable activities, and the Dalai Lama did say he likes his puddings.
Right.
But joy is bigger than that. It's much more to do with, well, a story that the Archbishop tells is, supposing you've got a woman who has got a child who's very ill and she's up all night looking after them, worrying about them. At the end of it, if the child is getting better, she is really joyful. But you wouldn't say she'd had a pleasurable time or even a happy time.
Okay.
But in the same way of giving birth and other things like that, and lots of situation in life where difficulties can lead to joy.
So joy can come out of difficult circumstances.
That's right. It could be difficult circumstances. It could be more pleasurable circumstances.
Okay.
So they do talk quite a bit about suffering. Both of them have a lot in common, but one of the things where I felt that they had more difference was around the issue of suffering, in that the Archbishop kind of said, well, you know, when you're going through something, you can't really help what emotions you have. So if you're feeling angry or irritated or whatever at the time, but afterwards you might sit back and say, well, actually, I can see that I've grown through that experience, or I've now got more compassion for those people because I realised what they were going through, or something like that. Whereas the Dalai Lama tended to say, actually, I think you've got more control over your emotions than you think you have.
So all those things, are they meant to kind of work together to point towards joy?
Well, that's right. I thought I put this slide up because I thought suffering can lead then onto growth and compassion and appreciation. It doesn't, you know, some people, it doesn't always. It depends on the circumstances. Maybe it depends who you are as well. You know?
Yeah. So, and he also talks, doesn't he, about a concept of Ubuntu, which is that concept that a person is a person through other people. And one of the examples he gives is that if you give a small piece of bread and it benefits you to share it with somebody else. That's right.
I think even if you just gave it to them, it would still benefit you in some ways. That's what he's saying, isn't it? Yeah. He says, and we've written the quote above, that our greatest joy is when we seek to do good for others. And again, all the way through the book, it's very clear, they're both very clear, that we are so interdependent on other people. We wouldn't exist. There are so many areas where, if you look at your own lives, or if you look at the lives of humanity together, we're so dependent on other people. And it's our joy to help them. So they talk about it as being a vicious circle. No, not a vicious circle, a virtuous circle. Because they say basically, if we're not happy but we're kind and compassionate, then that'll help to make us happy. It'll help to make somebody else happy. When other people are happy, they might do things that make us happy, or we might just enjoy other people's happiness. So basically it's like this circle. Somebody's got to start it, and then it'll continue. They pick up on these 8 areas which they say, if you have a look at, these can all help you increase your joy. The one that I noticed there that I wouldn't have perhaps thought of was humour. That's the one I haven't seen, I think, in lists of other things. Which isn't surprising when you read about like the little ways they interact with other people, is it?
So all of those things together, or aspects of those things, might lead you towards joy if you're able to practice those things.
That's right.
And that's interesting because that's connecting quite a lot with what you said earlier about kind of giving to other people, and joy being an outward thing that you can practice for others as well as, and that kind of brings your own joy back to you in a way.
Yeah, it's very definitely not about positive thinking or just trying to think yourself joyfully or anything like that.
Yeah. grounded in practice.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
Mm.
So we shall see people in the Zoom call.
Yeah. So afterwards, if you want to join us, you can join us for to talk through some of the things that we've introduced in the Zoom, which is going to be at 5:15.
And some people might have read the book and want to bring up other things that we haven't had time to do.
Yeah. So a couple of things that people might want to think about.
Well, you could think about, are there any questions that this introduction has led you to be thinking about?
Yeah. What about anything that you found surprising in the introduction? So if you've got a moment, you might want to think about those things, and if you're able to join us for the Zoom, then we'll have an opportunity to talk further about it.
Still
Hi, I'm Nets and this is Dave, and we're part of Inclusive Gathering Birmingham, and we're going to talk a little bit today about Dave's experience of autism.
Yes, I received a very late diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, a condition on the autistic spectrum, in 2014 it was. I'd suspected for some time that I might have some of the characteristics of autism, didn't I? That there were some things in the way I related, and particularly how I related to Nets and the social skills that I sometimes struggled with and found difficult, or acted in different ways that surprised people sometimes. Is that right?
Yeah, we often picked up, difficulties especially in sort of parties and difficult social situations like that.
Yeah.
So you decided to go for a diagnosis.
Yeah, went to my GP, got a referral, went to a psychiatrist, and they gave me this diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. In some ways I went quite down when I first got that, but I realised that it gave me such insight into my life. I looked at all the characteristics of autism and went, yeah, that's me. As I saw Asperger's being unpacked, I went, I can relate to that from school. I can relate to that at work. I can relate to that in our relationship.
And we found a workbook that we started to go through that set out some of these characteristics, and also like a toolkit of ways that you could use to try and overcome some of the issues. And we found that really helpful. It totally changed our relationship, didn't it?
Yes, it's just so insightful when you have someone confirm that was my personality, to actually be able to learn about myself in this way is so helpful.
And you went from there to coaching others on the spectrum, didn't you?
Yes, I had taught for over 20 years teaching psychology, and took a voluntary redundancy from that, and I'd done a qualification in coaching, and so I decided, well, maybe I could coach people also on the autistic spectrum, and began gaining clients that the following year, and eventually set up Asperger's Heroes, which was is initially a coaching service, and was eventually set up as a community interest company where I could help other people that are also in that similar situation.
Towards the end of last year, Asperger's Heroes set up some workshops, which were initially meetings in a garden centre not far from here, but COVID put a stop to that, didn't it? So that's changed a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, it continued, in fact, but continued on Zoom, like lots of things have. And a number of, we'd done some surveys. A lot of people wanted some sort of meeting where they could talk about all these aspects of autism and neurodiversity. That's the idea that we are just different, and our brains are wired differently. And so, taking a very positive view, looking at the strengths of autism, we began to discuss these, and eventually decide to do some workshops and to look at how we could raise awareness of autism in the wider community.
Welcome to this week's Love Feast. If you haven't been with us before, this is a time when we like to celebrate the hospitality in the community that we normally have together when we can meet in person, through food and through eating. And Jesus did a lot of eating in the stories in the Bible, and that was a big part of how he related to people, and sat down at the table with people that others didn't expect him to sit down with, and that was a little bit countercultural. Anyway, you might have noticed that my family has grown by one this week. we should introduce ourselves. Anyway, this is my husband Joel. Say hi. This is not my husband Martin.
Not the father.
And this is Josie and Evie. So Martin is I'm Danielle, and Martin is one of our best friends going back decades. And in lockdown, obviously we had to keep our distance, but we decided to kind of form a bubble with Martin. So we're able to have him here with us today for dinner. So first I'm going to ask Josie a question, then I'm going to ask Martin a question. Josie, what is your favorite kind of food?
Biscotti and meatballs.
Yeah. Biscotti. Very good.
And meatballs.
Yeah. And what do you like about sitting down and eating together as a family with Martin?
Because I like it.
You like it? Oh, very good. Martin, what about you?
Well, for me, food has always been a kind of key ingredient with us. It's like just coming here is part. I almost think, oh, am I hungry? Yes, let's go to Danielle's and Joel's and get fed. You like greet me at the door with a plate of food practically every time I come and shake it. And I think it just is an extension of the love you guys have for me. It feels very much part of the heart and soul of your whole being as a family and your invitation. And I've seen this, you do this for so many people over the years and for communities, and you just reach out in that way, and you're very hospitable and inclusive, and you just always let me house sit for you and all those things. Well, I mean, that works both ways, but incredibly open, and food is part of that. Yeah. It's a lovely thing to be sharing.
I think we really felt the not being able to have you in the house for food and not be able to have other friends around to eat with us has been one of the hard things of lockdown. So it's really nice to be able to kind of celebrate a love feast with Martin. It feels like great. Martin, would you like to? Are you okay to pray for the food?
Yeah. Sure, I can do that. Heavenly Father, we ask you to bless this food and come among us. We thank you for all those who have laboured to produce it, and we ask you to be with us as a whole community now as we share this together. In your name, amen.
So wherever you are, whether you got a biscuit or you got curry like us here, feel free to dig in and pour yourself a drink, and we're just gonna tuck in and start to eat.
And just have some food.
Tears may fail, my song will rise to you. Though my heart may fail, my song will rise to you. While there's breath in my lungs, I will praise you, Lord. In the dead of night, I'll lift my eyes to you. When the waters rise, I'll lift my eyes to you. While there's hope in
So thanks for joining us today. Hope you got something out of that time together. And just a reminder that we're going to move over to Zoom at 5:15 and have a group discussion about some of the themes from the Book of Joy. And you're very welcome to join us whether or not you have read the book. Hopefully you've picked up some stuff from this conversation today that has piqued your interest in that. I'll post the link below now, and you can also find it on our website and on our social media. So there's a few things going on in the next number of weeks. Next weekend, we're actually hosting a virtual pub quiz. We've done it a few times before. You're very welcome to join in and, invite friends to come along as well. I'll post the details below. We're hoping to think a little bit more about how we connect and do some more fun social stuff over the summer. So watch this space for that. Also, next weekend on Saturday, you've heard David Derbyshire share his autism journey story. And if you'd like to hear more about that or ask David some questions, he's actually participating in a Zoom webinar on Saturday, the 25th, as part of Civic Square's Front Room. We'll post a link to that here now, and we'll post about it again in the week if you're interested in being part of that conversation. Speaking of conversations, on the 1st of August, Naomi and I, who are both part of the leadership here at Inclusive Gathering, are hosting a book club conversation as part of our other job. We both work with Red Letter Christians UK. It's an open book club to talk about the book by Ben Lindsay called We Need to Talk About Race, Understanding the Black Experience in White Majority Churches. So we're it's a big open book club, but we're going to actually have a breakout room specifically for folks from Inclusive Gathering. So if that's something that you'd like to participate in on your own anti-racism journey, then we'd love to invite you to be part of that with us. So one more thing. Thanks to those who give financially to help support some of the costs of putting on church even in this way. If you're part of our community and you'd like to be part of helping to keep things going financially, you can find out how to give at inclusivegathering.org.uk/give. But there's no pressure to do that. But some people like to participate in that side of things too. So, and with that, the last thing to do is just to leave you with this blessing for today, the same one that we share whether we're in person or we're not. May we live fully, may we love wastefully, and may we have the courage to be all that God has created us to be. See you at 5:15 on Zoom.